So last session of the day, but probably my favorite two people, Jason and Shachar, whose name I always mispronounce. Hey, both of you. I think both of you are joining from sunny California. Is that right?
I'm in Seattle, actually.
You're in Seattle. I thought for some reason you had moved to California from Seattle, but okay, West Coast. And Shachar, you're traveling, right? Where are you these days?
Yeah, greetings from Santa Fe. I'm here for the week.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, so just as a quick backdrop, Superside's putting together this sort of guide, I would say, on like the dysfunctions between marketing and creative teams, why they exist, what kinds of issues exist, what can we do about it. And I'd interviewed Jason and Shachar separately about this topic and get their thoughts. And everything that they said, I was like, this is something that people need to hear. And also they're two peas in a pod in the sense that they have two very different roles, but they're actually trying to solve the same kinds of problems. So I was like, let's get these two on the same session because that would be cool. So here we are. Fast forward to today, they both agreed and it's going to be great. So let me just quickly introduce the session. I mean, really like the crux of this upcoming session is to figure out, hey, if you're a creative team or a marketing team, how do you balance process? How do you balance achieving like your metrics? And of course, like actual exploration as well on the design team. How do you balance all of those things? So we're going to dig into everything from hiring strategy. How do you work together? Is there, Jason has he's experienced at Amazon, this squad model that Amazon has used. So we'll talk a little bit about stuff like that. How do you continue encouraging exploration and creativity and original thinking while getting shit done, pardon my French, but like you have to still get stuff done and you still want to explore. So let's jump right into it. Jason and Shachar, do you want to just quickly introduce yourselves? What are your roles? What companies do you work at? And also I would love to hear, how is your design or creative team set up today?
Sure. You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Sound good? All right. Well, my name is Jason Henrickson. I am the creative operations manager at Cloudflare. Pretty new here. I've been here just under a year now, and it's been great. As mentioned, I was previously from Amazon. I was at Amazon for 8 years, where I'd worked as a designer, an art director, and as an operations manager. So I have a long career in design at Amazon, and now I'm taking those skills over to Cloudflare. Right now, my team is around 11 people. We're slated to grow up to 20 in 2021. So we are a growing team. And myself and my creative director report directly to our CMO.
Nice. How about your setup, Shachar?
Yeah, hello. I'm the executive creative director at a company called Picsart. I've been at the company for a year and a half now, and we have a global team of almost 50 designers. And that's including teams from China, Japan, Armenia, Russia, and America, of course, India, Brazil. My job is working a lot with the design team, not only on up-leveling their skills, making sure that we're showing up in the right light, we're representing the brand in the right way, but also making sure that they have the right opportunities, that they feel like they're fulfilling their own kind of career goals and growth, and they're growing as artists. So that part goes hand in hand with process. So I've been focusing a lot on how do we give that space for the artists, the motion designers, the writers, while still giving them the ability to execute well.
Yeah, so, that makes a lot of sense. Tell us, I guess, Shachar, we'll start with you. What is the nature of work? What is the volume of work? If you could quantify it somehow as like projects, tasks, initiatives, work streams, whatever it is, if you could just give us a sense of that.
Yeah, so when I joined, one of the first things we did, we wanted to make sure that we're always looking at projects in the sense of impact versus effort. Not every project is the same, and we wanted to make sure that we're treating it the right way. So we kind of created a very kind of common thing. You've seen it in a lot of companies, a tier system to evaluate how much effort we want to spend on each project and evaluate what are the resources against it. So when I look at the types of projects we tackle nowadays at Picsart, there's a lot of day-to-day tasks, kind of like lower tier. We actually get 180 requests a month from 7 countries, 18 departments. So those are a lot of ongoing small requests. So that requires a specific approach. And then we have the bigger, like higher tier requests. Think like those integrated campaigns, high production value, kind of films or branding moments. All those require a different approach, maybe a bit more bespoke. And those are on top of the daily tasks. So to summarize, we tackle a lot of different projects, but what really helps us is understanding where do they fit in? How do we want to resource and staff against it?
Yeah, that makes sense. I have so many follow-up questions, but I'll just jump to Jason real quick. What about you guys? I know you had mentioned that you have a really large marketing team, right? So I imagine that's mayhem.
Yeah, it is mayhem. We get a lot of requests in. We're averaging about 30 new requests a week. So I guess that averages out to 120 a month. We are doing the same thing where we have a tier system set up where we're evaluating the amount of effort that we need to put into each project. And we classify things into 2 categories, whether it is a quality project or it's a velocity project. Does it need to be done fast or does it need to have a higher quality is kind of how we're looking at it at a very simple term. Of course, there's things that fall somewhere in the middle sometimes where we have to kind of weigh that. And then some of the fast stuff, it needs to be done in a day. And some of the more quality stuff where we really need to spend time on it, like a video or a campaign or a big marketing push, we'll spend a quarter or 2 on getting those kind of projects completed.
Yeah, that's a lot. I can see why there's a role like yours on the team. So I have a bunch of questions. Let's just start with, why did Cloudflare invest in having someone dedicated to this operational side of design, this design ops, this creative ops role? Why do you think that was?
I think there's a lot of operational excellence that can come with someone like my role on a team, where we can look at the metrics and look at the data and help find those areas where we can say, this team needs more support. We need to hire in this area. And so I do a lot of work with data that a lot of the creative directors, they just don't have time to do. Not that it was out of the scope of what they could do, but a lot of it, if your head's down working on creative work, you need someone who can focus on the data and tell you kind of like what's going on with creative. And then also, I kind of skirt that line of like project manager, program manager, and operations manager at Cloudflare. So I'm kind of filling all those open roles that a bigger design team would have. And that's something that was really needed. There is no one else like me on the creative team. I'm the team of 1 that does all of that work. So budgeting, contracts, hiring, work management, work trafficking, pushing back on tickets, that all falls on me. And that's the type of work that would really take away from letting creatives be creative in their day in, day out kind of process. So as our team was growing, my role was the first role hired. They determined that my role was needed before even hiring a creative director. It was just to keep work moving. And then against an existing brand guidelines set up, and then we can bring someone in to push that creative bar farther.
Wow. I haven't heard that before, but yeah, like you sound like a one-man army. I mean, that's a lot that you're doing. And I'm guessing, Shachar, like I don't know if you have a Jason on your team, but if not, are you doing all this work? Like, is that on your shoulders?
Yeah. Of course, at the executive level, there's a lot of kind of management that goes beyond kind of just pure creative design or writing. But we do have an operations manager. Her name is Karine. She's awesome. And we would be nothing without a strong operations team. At the end of the day, I agree with everything Jason is saying. We are hiring designers and creative thinkers to do exactly that, design and think creatively about challenges and problems, for us to clear the runway, for them to have a clear process, set expectations, deliverables, and they know how to work. That just let them do more work that they're qualified at, which is design and creative thinking. So big supporter of that.
Makes sense. Both of you, I mean, Jason, perhaps more you than Shachar, but I also heard the word tickets, which is interesting. That if I was a creative, that would be the bane of my existence. What is a ticket, and is it mostly work? Is the design and creative team mostly working on things that come down the pike, or is there like a ton of proactive design projects as well? I know you mentioned integrated campaign, Shachar, so I'm guessing there's like a good mix for you guys. But yeah, what does it look like in both of your orgs? How much of it is proactive versus reactive?
Well, in my org, we're doing a good kind of mix of proactive and reactive work. I'd say a lot of the rush work, a lot of the stuff that needs to be done quickly, is very reactive. It's coming down from a marketing team. It was thought of last minute. And yeah, a lot of that work comes in via a ticket. However, if we do have something that we want to push further, like we're going to redo our illustrations, or we're going to work on a new animation guideline set, we still put a ticket in on that. We use Jira as our ticketing system, and I'll create tickets for my own team all the time on these projects. And a ticket is just a great method to track input into a project. We can see, how many weeks we've been working on it, sprint over sprint. We can make sure that everyone has a balanced workload. They don't have too many things in their workload for that week. And we can also see, go back and historically see who's improving, who's doing more week over week, who's needing a little bit more support. I would say tickets are the key to any kind of design ops role. Is they're going to have some sort of way to track the work. I know it sounds like it takes away from creative, but most of the creatives I've worked with who have worked on a team that doesn't have tickets, they are excited for tickets to come in. They're like, yes, thank you so much. Because if you don't have tickets, you don't know how much everyone's working.
Yeah, you have visibility on all the projects, and you have visibility on who's working on what, and then you can resource accordingly. No, I fully get that. I guess maybe my larger question, sorry to interject, my larger question is, wouldn't it be great if design was helping set the agenda with the teams that are requesting the design in the first place?
Yeah, we do that for larger campaigns. For bigger projects, that's definitely part of it. There's kickoff meetings. There's being looped in early, where I'll go to meetings and we're going to have a kickoff. We're going to talk about the project months before the ticket is ever started. And that does happen, where we start helping set up the foundation of what a campaign might be. But it always starts from a marketing request on my team. And that's the way it's generally worked everywhere, is a marketer puts in that request, and then we kind of act against that request.
Okay, got it. So you're saying marketing might say, hey, we're going to run this blah, blah, blah campaign this quarter. Someone from design has a seat at that table, whether it's you or someone else. You know what's coming down the pike, because it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that there'll be like a couple of videos, there'll be some Instagram focused something. You have a sense, and then you resource accordingly. And then by the time the actual projects or tickets come down, you're already fully set up. Is that basically how?
Yeah. Okay. That's how it generally works. Sometimes it comes in really loose, where like marketing will come to us and they're like, we need to drive 2 million in value in Q4, and we're like, okay, what does that mean? How are we going to do that? What are your ideas? And they're like, I don't know. And then we figure it out. We put our heads together, we brainstorm, we whiteboard, we figure out a direction, and we make some design and marketing magic happen.
Nice. Shachar, what about your world? How does it work there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Even just the world of tickets is very inherent to like the tech sector, right? Like a lot of engineers use Jira or Asana. So the idea of tickets feels very organic to these kind of Silicon Valley companies. But I remember starting in advertising, I was at ad agency, and we would get like these manila envelopes. That was my like ticket. And it's really a game changer to have tickets or Jira or this kind of organizational system that you can really have that 10,000 feet view of what's happening across teams, where are we spending most of our resources. But to answer your broader question, right, you're asking basically how much of our work is proactive, us coming to the table with a solution, and how much of it is a marketer or the CEO or the C-suite coming to us and saying, hey, we need to solve this ASAP. And I think it's a healthy mix of both in our case. I think we're in a unique position where we are a company that is in the design business. So to some degree, our designers, our creative thinkers are people who are experts in the subject matter. They understand the product and what needs to happen in this sector. So when I joined, we had some discussions. Do we call the team the brand and creative team? Is it just the brand? Is it just the creative? Maybe it sounds like semantics, but to me, it was a very important kind of distinction. And it kind of shows our approach in terms of proactive and kind of reactive. Brand is a lot of us coming to the table almost like consultants. We'll go to different departments, community, partnerships, paid UA, all these different departments within the company and help them figure out what's right for the brand, what's right for the company in that regard. So just today we released a new marketing program called Picsart X, which is basically us working with the partnerships team to figure out how do we show up when we partner with the artist we really love. So that's a bit more proactive.
Right.
On the other hand, we have a lot of tasks from the creative side that kind of get it done mentality, where we need discover pages, we need app store screens, we need performance-driven metrics and deliverables, and those are coming from the stakeholders. Those are needs that are generated from the business units.
That makes sense. You had shared with me in a different conversation that you also own your own, or like a big part of your own budget that allows you to go and be proactive and pursue things that no one's quote unquote requesting, right?
Yeah. Of course, we need to be responsible adults with that budget. So I never want us to be this kind of Wild West department that just does things on their own. I love the idea that we can partner with different departments and kind of figure out together what's right for them. But the ability or the luxury of having your own budget means that we have a say when it comes to how to execute the creative. Suddenly we can ask ourselves, do we want to work with an agency on this project? Do we want to hire a freelancer? Do we want to work with Superside? And that kind of frees us up because, again, to some degree, we're experts when it comes to what does it take to make a design happen? What does it take to make a film happen? So another just kind of fun example, we were producing a campaign that will launch later this year or next year. And we were looking at the type package and we wanted to challenge ourselves. Like, how can we go further? So the ability to have your own budget allowed us to reach out to a Spanish type designer and have her join the project, where in other cases, we would need to kind of explain to the stakeholders why we need to invest in type packages and how will it contribute to the campaign. Here, it was a bit more streamlined.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. Jason, in your case, you mentioned budgeting, resourcing. You seem to handle all of that. Similar to Shachar, like who controls, I guess, budget ultimately? And do you even need to get approval? I'm curious about that process.
Yeah, I have a very different situation for my budget. So I own the budget for tools and services. So things like Superside, or we use Frame.io, Canto, a couple other tools that we use. So I own that budget. But when it comes to project budget, that's owned by the requesting team. So what commonly happens is, like, let's say a team comes to me and they request a video, then I will help them find an agency. We'll get a bid from the agency. Then I'm like, this is the bid, do you accept it or not? And I get them to get it approved. So I do push a lot of that billing back onto the requesting marketing team.
Got it. Okay.
I don't have that flexibility. Yeah, I don't have that flexibility that Shachar has, where he can, go and pursue things that he feels will work good for the company. I need a marketing reason to go and do those types of things.
Right. But you could, in theory, challenge that requesting party and say, hey, if you have the time and you really want to push the boundaries here and you want to be really creative, we could spend more time on exploration and doing these other awesome things. I guess I have seen in past companies that I've been at that sometimes, like, the creative team will almost like provide like a buffet. Like, it'll be like option 1, option 2, option 3. And then the requesting party is like, cool, this is, a bit of a moonshot. Let's go nuts. Let's go nuts on this. Let's try this. How does that, can you have those kinds of conversations at Cloudflare?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Most of the large projects that we do like that, we do through an RFP process with several people, and we get a couple of different agencies involved, and they all kind of present a different idea, a different direction, usually a different price point, and then we let the marketing team kind of work with our creative director to choose the best one for their fit.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And Shachar, I guess just on this point, would you be able to say that, hey, because the creative design team has maintained creative control and knows what's best, would you say that you can see a direct impact on the productivity or the performance of something, or the actual outcome of something?
Yeah, there's good and bad in it. It definitely frees us up to kind of think about what we want to achieve creatively. Like it allows us to be a bit more open in terms of our approach and execution. But there's a liability to it as well. Because we're handling a large sum of money, it requires at least me or some of the leadership within my department to be a bit more familiar with that world of finance and make a case to leadership about why we're spending this money. What's the ROI, or kind of how are we measuring what we're doing? So in a sense, it made for the day-to-day designer, it made the job not only more easier, more exciting, because they can tap all kinds of people that they are inspired by and they're really excited about. But for the leadership team, it kind of actually complicates our life. Because we are not like experts at FP&A and or necessarily kind of. Yeah, exactly. We are creative experts. But I like the idea that creative people are getting closer to the money. For me, to know what does it mean if I'm suggesting that we go and film something in Toronto, like for me to know the cost implication of that and how we want to measure it, just makes a more solid case when I present it to leadership and so on. Yeah,
cool. I guess like in terms of the ratio of, maybe let me take a step back. I did like a bit of a poll on LinkedIn just earlier this week. We got over 200 responses. And the question was very simple. What is the ideal ratio of marketers to creatives? What should that be? 1 to 4, 1 to 2, 1 to 1? Lots and lots has been written about this topic from a product standpoint. So like the developer designer ratio is well established and there's lots of good thinking. But I Googled and there was like nothing about the designer marketer ratio. And I offered some options on LinkedIn in the poll, and it looked like the winning, almost by 60%, the winning option was 1 to 4. So 1 creative for 4 marketers. Do either of you have an opinion on this?
I would love to have 1 designer for every 4 marketers on my team. That would be amazing. I've generally worked in the 1 to 7. I think that's a great ratio number for my team. That's what the goal is. I'm currently running around 1 to 25. So
oh, wow.
It's a very different type situation on my team.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts on, I know there's different types of design maturity. Every org's sort of go-to-market process is very different. So it's really hard to kind of answer this question. I fully get that and appreciate that. You obviously, both of you use outside, whether it's freelancers or Superside or agencies or whatever. Are you counting that extra help that you have in the mix, or are you only talking about internal designers?
I'm only talking about internal designers in this case. That's where we do flex into Superside, is that help fill that gap, right? Obviously, 1 creative cannot do the design work for 25 marketers. We have to have an agency like Superside that can pick up some of that extra work and help us get it done. And, we also use contractors and agency work as well.
Yeah. Shachar, how do you think about that ratio? And is there like a balance to be struck in your mind?
I'm a creative person, so I'd love to reverse that ratio and have
totally.
more designers.
Yeah.
But I totally understand it. it does make sense to think about the amount of incoming requests and how many people do we staff against it. But it's really interesting, like even if I think about the past 2 years, the approach to design has kind of been opened up a bit. The ability to tap different freelancers in different geographies, different agencies or service providers like Superside allowed me to kind of scale up and down the team based on the incoming requests. So the more we can plan with the marketers ahead of time, I can know the right ratio for specific projects. Again, going back to the kind of initial conversation we had at the beginning of this conversation, knowing the tiers of each project, knowing how much effort and impact, if we can predict for Q1, for Q2, what's going to happen, then that allows us with this kind of new order of kind of design to scale up, scale down our teams. So I actually think a kind of a solid ratio won't always work. So rather kind of like figure out what's right for each project or for each kind of quarter, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I like the point that you also made earlier very subtly about, at least in your case, I know you said you have a global creative team, you have a distributed creative team. In your experience, has that helped being more agile somehow?
Definitely. There are some practical advantages, like kind of just turnaround times where like US goes to sleep and work still gets done. There is also just kind of cost measurements that we look into and based on geographies, but also there is just a creative advantage, allowing for more perspectives and allowing for different cultures to weigh in on design and make it seem maybe a little less westernized is something that is super interesting to me. I want to shy away from that kind of Silicon Valley look and embrace the global nature of our creator community. So the more I can tap other designers in other places of the world, the more we'll create that kind of global look and feel. Here's another example. We just finished a TV spot for America, and the Russia team actually produced it and designed it. And so I love seeing their take on what would appeal to Americans.
Nice. So you decided to give that team the autonomy to figure that out. It's not like you put two teams against each other and like pick the best one. You said, hey, Russia creative team, figured out this TV spot.
Yeah, we work globally. So of course, like I attach to them like our director from the US. But for them to be able to work with an animation studio from Santa Monica, that's first of all a level up for them. They're like learning how to work with kind of bigger agencies, like how they approach the work. So I already see them approaching the newer projects with that kind of new mindset. And they were able to help the agency and the US team because they brought that fresh perspective, that different design aesthetic. So
cool. Is there a way that the impact of diversity can be measured on the end result or outcome? Is there a way that you can, I mean, I know there's some anecdotal stuff that we all see, but yeah, have you come across anything like that?
A measurement. Yeah. Jason, what do you think? I'm not sure. I've tried to quantify it.
It's a really hard thing to quantify, I think. I don't really have a good answer of how we would do it. It's definitely something I'd be interested in pursuing and bringing into my, my metrics that I look at, so we can show that it adds value. But right now, I don't know how we would do that.
Yeah. And I can see, right? Like if you're a company with a global footprint and you sell to, at least in the case of both of your companies, you're selling globally. It's not like you're only selling to North American audiences. So in your case, I can see that being supremely important. Measurement aside, it can be supremely important. There are definitely companies that are like, I'm only focused on selling to, Alabama. And that's there, your marketing, your creative, et cetera, has to be like, keep that audience in mind, obviously. And maybe it's like the opposite. It's a type of diversity, but it's like localized diversity, right? Someone who knows Alabama culture and understands the accent and like what food they eat or whatever it is. Cool. I guess just like shifting gears a little, Jason, you had mentioned to me in a conversation about how design teams at Amazon were set up to really have this like scalable, optimized process. and you had this, I think you called it like the squad structure. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what impact you saw that having?
Yeah. It was the pod structure, structure. So, at Amazon, we kind of worked under several different pods of designers that would work on different types of work. So, of course, we had skill set pods. So we'd have, the animators in one pod versus the visual designers in a different pod, and the motion designers would be in a different pod. So we had those types of pods set up, and that worked really well. And we also had pods that divided the workload. So we'd have a pod that worked on electronics because they did really well with that type of deliverable. And we had another pod that would work on P&G products because they worked really well with that type of deliverable. We'd have a pod that worked on lifestyle photography because they worked really well with that. And then we also had a pod that was probably my favorite kind of group in here, which they were just like firefighters. They were reserved for those last minute, has to be done in the next 2 hours requests. So they would take on anything. But their whole goal was just to get it done as fast as possible and get it out the door. So, and they would be like, we call them the rush team, but they would just take all these last minute rush requests off the plate so that when quality didn't necessarily matter, we were only looking at speed, we could get a lot of stuff cleared out of the queue. Because as I'm sure everyone who's worked on a design team knows, is that like, you could have a whole lot of deliverables and one rush request comes into your queue, and it's like, now you got to switch priorities, work on this and get it done today. And it could just set off the whole rest of the week. So the goal of that team was to like take that workload out of the main queue of projects, so that all the other designers could get their stuff done without interruptions. And that was a really successful pod that we set up.
Nice. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, Amazon is like gigantic. I imagine like the work done by these teams is gigantic. Yeah. So you need you want like structure, but elasticity to deal with all of that. So I love that, actually. That's super innovative.
Yeah, and just for reference, like at Amazon, we're dealing with 10,000 tickets a month.
Right.
That could be, 14 to 18,000 assets a month from the team. So when you're dealing with that kind of volume, it makes a lot of sense to like do whatever we can to streamline it.
Yeah.
Not really something you'd have on a team of 11 like mine right now.
Right. Yeah. Shachar, are you guys organized a certain way, or like what does the makeup look like on your team?
Yeah. So we've been actively discussing the idea of generalists versus specialists. When I think about our teams, obviously we have different teams in different geographies and different disciplines. So that already kind of creates different buckets for people. But then when we look at the types of tasks coming our way, a lot of them require some specialization. Meaning, if I'm doing a design for the App Store screen at Apple, not only I need to know what performs best there, I need to be knowledgeable about what updates Apple is going to do to the App Store and kind of be on top of that. It requires a special relationship with that department. On the flip side, I know as a creative person and someone who is working with designers that the worst thing for designers is for them to feel like they're in a rut creatively. If they keep on repeating kind of that rinse and repeat for the same task, the same style, without challenging them in new ways, they'll kind of like lose the luster of doing something new or try and push the boundaries there. So that's kind of the active conversation we're having right now around kind of, do we want to specialize some people and we're piloting in some sections of the company? Or do we want to keep them nimble, kind of switch them between different projects, keep them fresh, kind of bring different thinking in all the time? Where it worked really well for me is actually Lyft. Back when I was at the company under the brand team, we were working under the CMO, Joy Howard, and she decided to create autonomous teams, but they were cross-functional. Meaning that unit wasn't only creative, it had a marketer, it had a media person. So basically, they were able to execute a full-on campaign with no outside approvals. Of course, we
Whoa.
would share some of the work, but we were given the autonomy to create work and run with it. And that created a very fast and very interesting kind of work output.
That is cool. The alignment of all the teams might be an issue, but that's, I guess, a separate problem. But I could see, like,
Exactly.
you kind of working, you set the agenda and you can work towards the agenda and you own your own destiny. So that's actually interesting. I guess, like, in terms of just like measurements and the sharing of, shall we just say, goals and maybe KRs, like key results or KPIs, do both of you set that for your team, or is it set by, let's say, the CMO and they cascade down to, like, whether it's a marketer or a designer, they all kind of have these shared objectives? Like, how does it work at each of your orgs? Because this is like a problem, like, worldwide. No one has been able to figure out how to properly incentivize and motivate creatives and create that shared alignment.
Yeah, it's worked differently on every single org I've been at. At Amazon, I was there for 8 years, but I worked across several different teams. Each team did it differently. Some of the larger teams, they would have those KPIs set by the CMO or the creative director. Other teams, they'd want me to set it and just keep pushing people to improve a little bit of a percentage year over year. Currently at my new role at Cloudflare, this is something that they've never done before. So we're in the process of just gathering our first year's data in this and setting that baseline where we can kind of talk about where we're going to push and how we can push the team faster. I have noticed, though, generally, I don't get a request like improve timeliness or you need to work on this KPI. It's more commonly like someone in the leadership role will say, we need to do more work faster. And then I have to figure out a way to quantify that and show them with metrics that we are making progress in that direction, rather than someone saying, I want your timeliness metric to go up by 3%.
Yeah. I'll just give like a quick analogy from Superside. So what we've done is our marketing team, we have like 5 sort of teams in marketing. The creative team is its own team. And each person on the creative team is almost like, for the lack of a better word, like assigned to a alternative marketing team. So for example, one person, like we have this really amazing motion graphics designer on our team, Alex, and the 70% of where his time is spent is supporting the performance marketing team. So he has a shared KR with the performance marketing team to improve whatever it is, conversion, whatever it is for that quarter, right? Similarly, we have an amazing UI designer on the team, and his shared KR with a few other teams is improving conversion on specific landing pages or homepage, so on and so forth. So we've been able to kind of create like some loose alignment, like, hey, you're still gonna follow the work, and you're still gonna do the work that is requested and that your creative director outlines, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately at the end of the quarter, how we measure your performance and how your bonus is based on, did you hit this KR or not? And did you support this team that you're like tied at the hip with? Any thoughts on that approach? Does that work? Have you seen other approaches? Shachar, how do you guys do it at Picsart?
Yeah, it's been another kind of ongoing conversation we've been having internally around how do we measure and kind of determine if this was successful. Was it worth our time? And I think, first of all, we have a very lofty and ambitious goal, and all the designers are aligned towards that. We need to turn Picsart into a household name. Now, how we do it can take all kinds of different shapes and forms, but it's really helpful to have that North Star, and we do have some metrics to measure it against. I think what I actually sense in terms of that friction, like I think everybody who worked with a creative team, there is a bit of a friction when it comes to measurement, data, KPIs, all that. And in my opinion, it's because it's misaligned with the goals of the individual. I'll explain what I mean. Yeah. If I think about the typical designer or motion designer or writer or producer, their goal in terms of their career and their growth is not necessarily hitting like we doubled sales. Like that's not what's going to get you hired for the next job.
Right.
What they're driven by is their portfolio. And that's very creative, that's very expressive. So for me, the challenge is, how do I link back that creative kind of force that they're trying to go after, that portfolio piece? How do I tie it to those measurements? How do I explain to that designer who just wants to create cool designs that no, actually, if that person in India clicked on it more often or kind of cared about the brand more, that's actually more meaningful work. So a lot of my conversations with the design team is, again, kind of going back to, hey, you told me that you really care about your portfolio. You want to expand your capability. You want to grow as a creative. This is how you do it. This is how we're going to be mindful to that. So I think it's a lot of education, more than just kind of making sure that they're hitting a KPI. That won't, it's more for them to understand why we're so focused on that KPI and how does it directly tie to their day-to-day work.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's different, there's definitely like generalists and specialists. There's also creatives that are very used to working with marketing, some that are not as used to working marketing. So there's all these different types of people that you have to accommodate for and make sure that they're, doing their best work. So yeah, I appreciate that. I guess let's do this. We're coming up on the hour. So folks, if you have questions, can you please note them in chat? We'll start taking them. In the meantime, I know Cassandra has been furiously typing all of the insights that Shachar and Jason have shared. So Cass, if you have a summary slide, can we just show it and we'll just run through it quickly while the questions come in?
Sure. Yeah. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I broke them up into like the 6 areas so we can tab through them, but you guys can talk through it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Ratios matter. Yes, of course. So the ideal marketer to designer ratio should be, it seems to me that there's no good answer, but that it should be like a deliberate top of mind type of thing, and that should be considered. And of course, you don't have to have every person in-house, right? Like sometimes it's helpful to have some specialists that you don't use all the time. They can be, whether it's a freelancer, whether it's an agency, whether it's Superside or something to that effect. But those ratios matter. And if I would say my 2 cents on that is that if you're like a company that's like largely driven by creative, I think Picsart probably is, given what they do. Think about like Nike and a lot of these other companies that are extremely design led. In those orgs, maybe the ratio is almost flipped, whereas like the marketer, the digital marketer, whatever it is in lower quantity than the creative. But it seems that from the LinkedIn poll that 1 to 4 seems to be a consensus across the board, but that doesn't really mean anything because you got to cater it to your unique situation. Anything to add on that before we move to the next slide?
Yeah, like you said, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to say nothing to add.
I agree with you. I think also my takeaway from this specific bullet point or ratio matters is also we're now entering a new kind of work style. And that kind of makes me reevaluate the ratios, or does it need to be so prescribed? For example, we know that the holiday season is always busy. We're going to get an increased amount of tickets. And that's not going to change. It's going to happen every year. So can we plan for it in advance so that the ratio is already adjusted accordingly because we know that when it ebbs and flows? So I think kind of understanding that now there's more flexibility in terms of your workforce and trying to predict those like incoming requests that are going to increase or decrease based on the time of year.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And actually, I was speaking with the head of brand creative at another customer called OddZero. They're also a tech company. And she was saying that this is such an interesting insight for me. It's so simple, but so obvious. She said that no matter what they do on the creative team, the marketing team and other teams that they support are growing so fast that it's like they're going like this. And so even if like they're literally trying to catch up, and it's like this like funny, like little weird step ladder slope, right? Their stakeholders' needs grow, their people grow. And no matter how many people you add onto the creative team, they're always kind of like stuck in this like loop and you're running behind. And so at that point, what do you really do? You have to find a way to like catch up. And in that sense, like the ratios and stuff are like completely pointless. So I get that. Cool. Let's talk a bit about attitude and working style. Yes. So it didn't quite come out in our discussion fully, but it seems that we all have consensus that, you know, where possible, designers and creatives should try to be proactive rather than react to tasks and projects coming their way, and that they should try to have some shared goals and KRs where possible, if it makes sense on those work streams, especially. And it's a great way to, I think it's a great way to create alignment and some similar incentives. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a creative should strive to be proactive, but generally, a lot of the time, the work is reactive. Like that's just the nature of it. Requests don't get planned out properly; they come in late. We have to jump on things quickly. Even some of those bigger campaigns that we want to spend more time on, we want to be proactive. We want to be pulled in. That's not always the way it happens. That's a thing to aspire to, but it's not the way it always kind of works out. So one thing I would just call out.
Yeah. And it can happen in small ways, right? Like I'll give an example from our world. We want to improve conversion across the board on our website. And that's not just the job of the CRO team, the conversion optimization team. That is the work of really everybody. And so our creative director said, hey, I mean, this will definitely have direct impact. Our brand is from 2019, our visual identity from 2019. It's time to evolve it and update it. And that's just going to have it's going to bear fruit across a number of different initiatives, right? So that, I'm mainly talking about proactivity from that lens, is for someone to say, yep, you're trying to solve this like little problem over here, but it's actually not an isolated siloed problem. Why don't we do all of this other work that will shore up other results? So that's just an example. Okay, Cass, do you have another slide? Yes, global team, perfect. Yeah, it seems like, at least in Shahar's case, the distributed creatives make for more agile teams, helps with round-the-clock support, great for budgets, of course, helps with localized content. I think this is the biggest learning, is like, why would you get a North American team to work on Spanish content when you can have a Spanish team, right? So that makes total sense. And of course, the cultural influence and the diversity of perspectives is always appreciated as well. I don't think anyone can debate this. Cool. Squad structure. Yeah. I think there's some comments in the chat as well. Like a lot of people were like, oh man, it would be so good to have like a rush team, which makes total sense. It would be good. Essentially, like, I think what I took away from it is that no matter what the structure is, it's nice to have that kind of pod setup where each has its own specialty. Maybe they have their own cadence in which they operate, or maybe they all have their own aligned KR to hit, right? However it works for your situation, and that no two designers are alike, no two creatives are alike, and skills aside, the way that they work can also be vastly different. So let's put them on teams and squads or pods that make the most sense in terms of scale. Anything to add on that, Jason and Shachar?
That was perfect.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, we kind of didn't discuss this also as much as I would have liked. We kind of just skimmed the surface a little. Any thoughts on this? Like, because I know, I think in both of your cases, both the design teams that you're on, mainly services like marketing and go-to-market, right? But product design is separated.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that? Because I've also seen companies where like the whole design team is all one big massive team. Airbnb is a great example of this. Like their team is ginormous and they just service the entire organization through that. Any pros and cons that you can talk through?
I've been on both types of teams, where it's one big centralized team and where it's very decentralized. And I like decentralized better because we can support our stakeholders better. What I find is when you're on a centralized team, sometimes the creative asks of a smaller team get kind of overlooked. For instance, when I was at Amazon, I worked on the big centralized marketing team for retail. And, hundreds of designers, we supported so many channels, but things that wouldn't get support would be like lawn and garden. No one wanted to do the work, so it'd always get the bottom of the pile. And so they had to go and out and hire their own creative team and kind of build their own team to get that support that they needed. And that's the problem I see with big centralized teams, is that someone always gets the short end of the stick.
Yeah,
That's
fair.
super
Sure.
interesting, Jason. I've only had experience working with decentralized teams, meaning that we're separate from like product design or content design. And I like it. I agree with Jason. I think it kind of allows us to focus on what we do best. But Picsart is in a unique position. Again, because we're in the design business, it kind of begs that overarching kind of bigger thought about design that kind of runs through different departments, runs through different disciplines of design. So I do think in my case, in Picsart, it might be interesting to try a centralized approach, but doesn't fit every company and does have advantages to be decentralized.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, and yeah, diversity of talent. We also talked about this. Yes, the true makers in the group. Like I think as much as marketers can come up with the campaigns, like the actual making of stuff is being done by the creative talent, and so it's important that group have diverse representation. Particularly, again, using the Alabama example, if your audience is diverse, then your makers have to be diverse to properly appeal to that audience. Does anyone have any great examples about this, even from the audience? Like, do you know of teams or companies that prioritize this and have done a great job? We'd love to hear, or you can tweet us or LinkedIn us if that's better. That would be helpful. Anything again here to add, Jason or Shachar?
I'll just share a story where, again, I'll take an example from Lyft, where I just immigrated to America. I haven't seen all parts of America, but Lyft was really focused on local markets back then, meaning that they wanted to unlock Atlanta in a way that is relevant for Atlanta, especially when the Super Bowl was there and stuff like that. So what was really helppful for me as a creative person is to actually visit the city, meet the people, kind of get immersed in the culture there. So while, like, of course, we'll have so many needs, I can't expect that for every task from India, we'll staff up against it from a designer from India. But if there's someone who can visit there, immerse themselves, have those conversations, then it's way better. I think it works very well in America, and I'd love to see it in other countries too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Thank you for that. Awesome. I don't think there's a lot of questions that we haven't answered. The few questions that came through, we kind of addressed them. So we'll end here. If there's any parting thoughts, Jason and Shachar, that people should think about, the bulk of like our audience on this particular session is creative. So if you have any parting thoughts, now would be the time. Any advice for people, particularly creative leaders?
I'll just say that as commercial artists, like basically we're lending our artistic abilities to companies. We're commissioned to create things for marketing and branding. It's important for us to learn that language, to embrace process and understand that that's actually going to make our job better. So I know a lot of creatives run away from process. They want to maybe kind of just put their headphones on and just kind of like jam on something cool and creative, but know that it will contribute to the end result. It will make you a better team player and will help you focus on what really matters and what you're an expert on.
Wow, that's perfect.
Well,
we're going to cut this out and promote this everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to make sure my team hears this too.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to say that's going to be as powerful as that. But what I would just say is, lean into your flexibility and lean into your collaboration. It's all about working through the work that we do in a way that, doesn't burn you out. That's a real important thing with creatives, is like keeping that burnout off your back so that you can still be creative. I think burnout is the worst thing that can happen to someone in a creative role, and doing anything you can do to avoid that is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Applies to really everybody, but yeah, creative in particular, because again, you need to have that space to create. Thank you both. This was super insightful. I love it, and I hope that we'll see like a big move where companies prioritize, whether it's a role or what have you, but a function that kind of looks after all of these things that empower creatives to do their best work, right? Like anyone that can think about process, budgeting, resourcing, all of those like headaches. I think that would be really, really helpful for everybody and for people to like just optimize their life. So thank you both, Shachar and Jason. This was super great. Everybody else, we'll see you on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us and have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thank you.